So a lot of yeah, like
No, so by default, they have the link to the YouTube channel. And on the YouTube channel, the live video should show up.
absolutely. Okay.
So that is the link that I publicized. So.
Please.
Ma'am, we are live on YouTube.
Okay. Shall we get started? By the time the intro is done, I think people would join in.
Yes, we can.
Maybe some of them are on YouTube already. Okay. Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thank you all for joining on this Friday evening before your weekend. I would like to welcome all of you for this event. It has been in the cards for a long, long time. Actually, a year ago, we started planning. Yeah, all this COVID and other things happened. And finally, we are here. I'm happy that we are able to do it. Thanks to Gayatri, who has been putting a lot of effort in mobilizing people and organizing events for the Women's Forum. And thank you, Matangi, for helping us out. We have also been discussing about this for a while. I'm glad we could make it happen today. So yeah, the topic of discussion today is like gender matters. What's happening in campus? I would like to put it that way. Most of the time, we all don't talk such things in open forum. We want, as when Women's Forum started functioning, opening the doors for students, I got a lot of calls and emails from students reaching out to me with general issues, and whether this can be taken up by Women's Forum or not, and who will constitute the Women's Forum. So there were a lot of questions from different sectors, including boys, including the Gen Sec, the previous Gen Sec. They were all very excited about opening up this Women's Forum to students. And that is, we have not been having any events for students all this time, that people did not know that there is a Women's Forum which was existing. So I'm happy that this is now kicking off today. And with this event, we would like to hear more from students on issues relating to anything gender related, gender diversity. How can we improve gender diversity, gender equity in campus? I'm looking for ideas and suggestions from students. I would like to hear from all of you. Yeah, I won't take much time further. So this, I would say, is the beginning of great things on campus. Okay. I would like to now invite our Dean of Students, Vasa, to formally welcome all of you and the participants and to kick off this event. Vasa.
Yeah. So good evening to all. I understand that today a panel of students will be discussing about gender matters in IITM campus. So I read it as gender matter in IITM campus, but I think Indumati ma'am has added matters. Just check that part. I don't know. I might be wrong, so please correct me. Of course, we all, depending on gender, have different needs, aspirations, and behavior. And we all also accept that everyone should have equal opportunities, fairness in treatment, and without rigid gender biases, gender prejudices, or gender roles. It is a fundamental human right that we all accept. However, we are not realizing the same in true sense. We just accept it, but we don't realize it, that it should be really the same, right? And there has been some progress over last, maybe say a decade, right? Or a couple of decades, maybe last one decade, no? Lots of changes we are observing in India that slowly, right? But we want to see that it really accelerates in terms of real understanding and understanding this aspect of gender equity, gender diversity, etc. So certainly we need many more such different programs and workshops to make us realize, right, at our academic level as well, the importance of gender equity and gender diversity. And I think today's panel discussion will bring out some, right, it's a one step forward towards understanding these aspects. And I thank Professor Indumati and her organizing team for inviting us to attend the panel discussion. Thank you so much. I also thank Professor Matangi, who will be moderating this panel discussion, and wish all the best to all our students, team, who will be discussing on the very important, relevant topic related to right, gender diversity, equity, in terms of gender matter or matters in IITM campus. Okay, thank you so much for involving me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe my pronunciations may not be good enough, but I hope I have conveyed some small, what
Yeah.
I thought, something about it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Vasa. I hope you stay around for the discussion.
Yeah,
Thank
certainly. I should learn.
All right. Okay. So I would next call upon Gayatri to introduce us to the bright and young and enthusiastic panelists who are all waiting to share their knowledge and experience, including the chair of the panel, Professor Matangi. Gayatri, over to you.
Thank you, ma'am. First of all, good evening to everybody. I won't take much of your time, so I'll start off with introducing the moderator for the discussion, who is Dr. Matangi Krishnamurthy. She is an associate professor in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, and her research work also includes anthropology of work and gender. And we are really excited to have her, heading this discussion. Apart from that, the student panelists are, span UG students from different student spheres. And so we have with us Brisha Gupta, who is the current Institute Sports Secretary, and she was also previously the Women's Representative for Sports. She is a fourth-year undergraduate from the Department of Biotechnology. Then there's Darwin, who is the current Hostel Affairs Secretary. He's also an Institute Secretary. And he's a fourth-year undergraduate in the Department of Engineering Physics. And there's Sankalpa, who is again a fourth-year undergraduate in the Department of Biotech. And she is a former head of IGEM. And I am a fourth-year student of Engineering Physics and Data Science. And I'm the current undergraduate representative within the Women's Forum, and I'm also a hostel secretary for Sharavati Hostel. And with this, I hope we can dive into the discussion. Over to you, Matangi, ma'am.
Thank you. That's fantastic, Gayatri. Thank you so much. Let me start by taking myself from the head position to the back bench around here. I think of this as the beginning of what I hope is going to be a terrific conversation, if our pre-conversation already gave me a hint of what's to come. So let me start by thanking the four of you for making time to come and think about this. As much as I enjoy the fact that so many people have logged in to listen to us, to me, the most beautiful part of this is listening to the four of you. So thank you, first of all. I'm looking forward to this greatly. And secondly, thanks to Gayatri for being the driving force behind this and doing all of the backbenching work of putting people together. And to Professor Indumati Nambi, who's been quite a force since she took over the Women's Forum. This is our first event, and as many have said before me, hopefully the first of many events as far as discussions are concerned. We have already had a slew of events, a slew of discussions. There's been a lot of talk. So this is the beginning. This is the heralding of gender no longer being something that shows up every now and then when there's a crisis, and then you can say goodbye to it because, grades and other things take precedence. Instead, let's start talking about the Women's Forum and gender matters as truly mattering in the verb and the noun sense of the word to address your conundrum, Professor Vasa. With that, let me invite each of our panelists to perhaps say a few words. Let me just throw a little googly at you, right? Each of you, from your own point of view, experiences in the Institute. Why does gender matter? I feel like it's becoming obsolete, right? We're now in an agendered, post-feminist world. So let me start by asking you, Brisha, can you enlighten us about how, in your view, gender matters?
Sure, ma'am. Actually, firstly, thank you, Gayatri, and thank you, all the professors who have been really involved with us. Actually, ma'am, you were thanking us, but we're really glad that you're bringing out our voices because eventually, I think we're talking on behalf of the student community. So, yeah. And coming to why gender matters, I personally believe, at least, that on an overall front, I've had a great experience at IIT Madras. It's not as a woman, but as a generic student, I've had a great experience. And I feel that the only thing today that probably, it doesn't really hamper us in any way, but there are instances where that is the only thing that is, sort of still it's yet to be the most optimal. And I feel that is the only reason why I would really like to talk about it today, because we're actually doing a lot. Like, for example, coming up with the Women's Forum, we have a lot of bodies on campus. We have people talking about it all the time. But just, really talking about the problems that are still existing, like after all of these solutions, would really help us move to the next step. So I think that is the only reason why I'm really glad this is happening.
Okay, so to paraphrase, to take it to the next level of optimization, so to speak. Yeah, in good old management speak.
Yes, ma'am.
Sankalpa, can I ask you to come up next?
First of all, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be on this panel and be a part of the Women's Forum. I really think it's been doing a lot of good work, and I'm really excited for this opportunity. And I thank all the professors and students who are involved with this initiative. I don't think that we are at the point where we are optimizing. In IIT Madras, women still make up only 10 to 15% of the student community, and that's just one gender. And really, the problem is that in institutes like this, where the representation of women is so little as it is, it's not acknowledged that the experiences that we have on campus can be very, very different from that of the so-called general student body, which is really just the general male student body, because it doesn't include us in some sense. And in many ways, gender turns out to be a barrier on campus in terms of small things and big things. And I think in this panel, we are really going to dive into what are all the different aspects of gender barriers and gender roles that are existing and enforced within the campus.
Thank you, Salkapa. We have the beginnings of conflict already, and I see already a marked shift between Prisha's point of view and yours, and I'll come to that very soon. Gayatri?
Yes, ma'am. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. So talking about why we should be talking about gender, I think on paper, infrastructurally and organizationally, there really isn't any discrimination, right? There may be few instances here and there, just differences in rules maybe in a few places, but for the most part, there is no intention to discriminate as such. And yet there is nobody stopping girls from writing J and getting into IIT. And yet the gender ratio was stuck at 13% in IIT Madras without affirmative action, and some 7 to 9% across the country. So that is really sad. And the reason for this is, I feel in a lot of ways, just the culture that is prohibiting women from realizing their full potential. And even on campus, simply because there aren't as many girls as there are guys. That results in differences in experiences. The underrepresentation just makes it harder for women on campus to live through that experience, and also for more people who are trying to come in, there is like a funnel effect. So we are a long way. We have a long way to go, is what I would believe. And these differences show up in the smallest of ways on an everyday basis, and sometimes these just snowball into having pretty big impact on our lives.
Thank you, Gayatri. And yes, we have a long way to go. And yet I see the three of you constantly moving back and forth between it's not so bad, but it's actually very bad. Right? There's sort of it almost feels like, I mean, the three of you, and I'll speak to Darwin in just a second. The three of you are, soon to be graduates in one of the premier institutions in the country. Clearly, you are shining examples of the fact that gender seemingly must not stop you. And yet, all three of you are speaking to a gendered experience, so to speak, the details of which we'll come to over the course of the panel. Darwin, I have a slightly different question for you, which is, of course, gender matters. And why does it matter? We see in the most obvious fashion. But is there cause for male-identified students in IIT to think that gender matters?
Ma'am, to be very frank, to start with this conversation, like for every voice, this gender matter topic is only about women's forum, right? So generally they talk about women's issues and things, right? They don't also think about the difficulty. It's about they always target girls. But whatever the experience, whichever I had in the interactions with the boys, it's about the lack of awareness about what they face or what they go through in their daily life, which matters. So on a point that, yes, it's very kind of a lighter issue for most of the boys, but once the awareness comes in and the things comes in from the start, maybe they'll start taking things very seriously.
Let me throw the question at you differently, Darwin. And this is a women's forum event, but the panel is titled Gender Matters. Right? So let me throw another unexpected word into the mix, which is masculinity. Right? Because gender does encompass all forms of being gendered. So would it be useful, for example, to speak about gender in a fashion that everybody experiences gender one way or the other? Yes, a lot of the female identified participants have spoken about the fact that the neutral is male. But are there specific problems that you think male identified students experience at IIT because of gender? Could you reflect a few minutes on that?
Yes, ma'am. There are a few problems which we also face on the other side, right? Maybe which I'll say it comes from the very root level when we start entering this college. We won't have a very big awareness and interactions with different genders, right? So we are all from different backgrounds, right? So some people from big co-ed school and from a very boys school, so they come from different backgrounds, and they try to start interacting with people, right? So in that initial part, that's where people lag, I feel, in the entire issue, right? So some people are very open, some people are very conservative and things, keeping all these differences in mind. So that's where the problem starts. We treat girls in a very different way. One guy has a different perception on girls at the start. So and all this backgrounds of everything, which also affects them initially. So that's where its roots up, and still that continues till the last. And still now there are a lot of people who are not aware whatever they're doing is a mistake also, right? So they think whatever they're doing is right. So that is also to add on to this masculinity part. So we think whatever we do and things are right. So the girls just type it up and comes up with bigger things. So that is also still like this.
Which is a continuity to Women's Forum is about women's things like Women's Time of the Month.
Yes.
Right? It's just a different realm altogether. Great. Thank you for bringing that perspective. And I think the first set of comments are great abstractions. Anybody want to add to this already?
So I actually have something to add to what Darwin was saying about how how it affects men, maybe. So one thing that I've noticed a lot on campus is the fact that, I mean, what we're doing is great, right? Uplifting women, because at this moment in time, yes, we are not probably faring as well as men on campus. But because of this heightened attention towards women, at least from a lot of us, right, who are trying to do something about it, what tends to happen is it alienates men who have issues. For example, I am not very sure of how many men are actually comfortable with filing complaints into CCash for issues that have happened to them. It's simple. Like, actually, we think that sexual harassment happens only, maybe it does. I'm not sure of the statistics, but maybe it happens more to women on campus than it does to men. But we don't even factor in for the fact that, they don't feel as comfortable coming and talking about it, even to the Women's Forum. Sometimes there are also things like, basically my point being, they're supposed to behave a certain way. They're supposed to, there are all these constructs that, they have to be the stronger one, or they have to, not cry about things, not be pressured about things, and stuff like that, like very random, like societal pressures that they feel, because of which I feel guys find it very difficult to emotionally express themselves, which can actually be a problem in a lot of places.
Thank you, Brisha. Gayatri, you have a hand up.
Yes, ma'am. Just a small point. She spoke about how she wasn't sure about the statistics. So there was a survey done by T5E a few years ago, which showed that there are guys on campus who have faced sexual harassment. So that just substantiates the point.
So what's coming up for me, and I think this is important, because lest we keep talking about it as a women's issue all the time, I think gender opens it out to saying that gender appropriate behavior produces strong forms of oppression on women, but also subtle forms of oppression on men at the same time, which you're not even allowed to call oppression. And I think we need to keep that in the background to figure out feminism, feminist allyship, all of those things. Darwin, you're sort of looking very confused. Is there something you wanted to say?
No.
I said oppression. That's too much, huh?
Kind of, yes.
I do believe that. I think gender structuring is a problem, and we can figure out how it's a problem for various kinds of people soon enough. But I want to bring it out. So let's move from abstraction to talking about something that all of you said, that gender works in small ways, but also big ways. So can I ask four of you to just each of you reflect on what are small oppressions? Can you do a little listing of small oppressions? Small things. They don't matter in the long run, but small things. Brisha?
So I actually have a different take on the small and the large oppressions, because I feel that it's an evolution. So it is these small things. So like Darwin said, right? A lot of times when guys, or whatever, like not only guys, actually girls as well, right? When they come to campus, a lot of us don't know how to interact with the opposite gender. For example, I studied in an all-girls school. Obviously, in my 11th and 12th, I only had guys. It was almost like an all-boys school. But the point being that a lot of us don't know how to interact very comfortably with the other group. And there will be these, one odd anomalies in your group that are probably more open or talk a certain way or objectify either men or women a certain way. And that imposes, these are very small things in conversations, right? Like just talking about maybe how a person looks, or, certain things you shouldn't talk about without that person's consent. And it manifests, I feel.
Would you be comfortable giving an actual example, Brisha? What's the language? What are the words? Let's find ways to make the audience connect to what we're talking about.
Sure. So, okay. So there's something that when I was in my fresh year that, it was something that came to my notice, and honestly, it was very horrifying for me, because in my first semester, right? So I heard that there was a group of guys who were sitting in Sangam and rating girls based on certain assets that they have, and creating a bucket list of who they would go for first. Okay. And these may be more drastic things, but I'm sure everyone relates that in conversation you do bring up, right? Okay, this girl is a certain way. Maybe she's from Mumbai, so she's more open to certain, other things than a girl from Chennai may be like open to. This has happened before, right? So the point being, these are certain small things that they talk about. Maybe it's a group. Like, for example, there may be one rotten fruit in a group, right? In your freshie year. And that person, because that person is comfortable talking about it, there is some other person X who probably had suppressed this feeling because he didn't want to, because it may not be societal appropriate. But now, because one person has spoken, this person is okay with talking about it. And out of this group of, say, 10 boys, 2 people are openly talking about this, right? Like objectifying women and all that. So other people who are freshers, who probably aren't as open talking about it, have now thought that maybe this is the new cool, and maybe this is how people talk. And they then start talking like, and then it becomes a whole group thing. So it was 2 before, and now 10 people talk the same way. And trust me, I personally believe that this infests a lot of, a lot of different things over the couple of years. Like people who really started off as really innocent, in that sense, innocent people, have gone on to perpetrate really extreme crimes, I feel, towards the end of your 3rd or 4th year.
So what you're talking about, Brisha, is just a very active culture of indoctrination vis-a-vis objectification of sexuality, gender, so on and so forth. Would I be right in saying that?
Yes, I think so.
So in a sense, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that as far as gendering in IIT is concerned, there is an active culture of objectification of women.
Honestly, I think on a very personal level, if I had to get very personal about it, I would definitely say so, because I've gone through an election, and trust me, people will do anything to ruin your reputation. And it's very easy to do it for a girl.
Of course it is. I mean, you go straight for the jugular, which is sexuality, right?
Exactly.
That's the first thing.
And the most important thing a girl cares about is her character. I really believe so. I'm sure it's the same with guys, but it's just so easy to target it for girls. And it is not my fault that, a certain meeting doesn't happen in an open space, but happens in a shady space. I can't affect that, right? I have an election to run. I have to win. It is not like.
What are shady spaces, Brisha? I will come to that in a second, but what are shady spaces? If I look at space itself in campus as gendered, as open and shady for women or shady for everyone?
No, I would say shady for everyone, but not comfortable for a woman, because you are, say, at that space at 3 a.m., 4 a.m. with a group of guys you don't know, right? But you just don't have an option rather than to talk to them. Sometimes you're called to boys' hostels. Like, for example, when you're campaigning, right? Like, I have had issues with people whistling at me campaigning. And I just feel that really hampers. Tell me, which girl will want to contest under such circumstances? It is, and not every girl is comfortable going to a boys' hostel and, actually campaigning there. Like, they come out without t-shirts. I'm sure they don't mean it. Like, some of them don't mean it. They're just not socially aware that, we shouldn't be this underdressed when a girl is campaigning.
Whereas at the same time, I assume that girls' hostel rules are such that boys don't campaign in girls' hostels. Would I be fair to say that? That's not allowed, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Gayatri, Sankalpa, all yours.
So if I may, yeah. So to take the point about objectification forward, so this was in private circles, but sometimes it's also perpetuated in teams and slightly larger groups. For example, I would like to believe that any freshie's first introduction to what the institute culture is like actually happens during the freshie night, because that is the one big event that they are participating in. And so this is what the freshie night stage looks like. That's the stage, and on both sides there are trip screens. And most of the jokes on the trip screens are objectifying the girls on stage. So a girl would say something and then people would start laughing, and the people on stage have no clue about what they're laughing about. The girl on stage has no clue why they're laughing. And but that was basically because of comments by people who are sitting on these trip screens, and vulgar comments over there. And also just a few other cultures, like how if it's there's this idea that the one event that you're looking forward to during freshie night is the girls' dance sequence. And that is fed into the heads of everybody participating in the Freshie Night, the audience, and the girls who are dancing themselves. There are seniors who come and tell you that, you are going to be the star of the show. This is what everybody is coming for. So you get into the college. This is the first big thing you do. This is what your seniors tell you. Your idea is, okay, so ye bhi chalta hai yahan pe. Like, this is how things work.
So if I understand correctly, your first introduction to being a proud member of the IIT community is how well you dance.
But not only choreo, a couple of other events also. Like, I think when we were during anchoring also, there are jokes that get a little vulgar, may not always be comfortable for everybody. So
what I'm
that's
reading
the
is
general
really, so
vibe.
correct me if I'm wrong, there is an active culture of sexualization of female identified populations.
Yeah, and also girls end up being party to it.
Sure.
They may not be entirely comfortable about it. They don't voice it out. They are also unsure about what other people think.
No, I understand. I mean, this is sort of the oldest trick in the book, right? To say women themselves participate in it. They also wanted. I mean, I'm not concerned with that because we are talking about not individuals, but cultures of the institution. So I'm taking all of this on board to understand that these are sort of rituals that are passed along. That, everybody participates in either consensually or through coercion or feeling a small bit of hesitation, but it's all right. So not to take away from any kind of pleasure in it either, not to speak about it constantly in this oppressor-oppressed narrative, but to speak about what is the gender culture around here. Would that be a fair question? Sankalpa?
Yeah, so adding on to both what Brisha and Gayatri were saying, is that right from first year, we sort of learn these behaviors. Like from first year, women are sort of typecast into certain positions, certain ways in which they act. And after the point, you almost can't take it back. If you start talking, if you start saying it's problematic, if you try to educate the people around you as you learn in college, as you grow in college, it seems like once people, especially of the male's gender, once they learn a certain behavior from first year, it sort of sets in. And there are small ways in which this becomes problematic aside from the sort of bigger cultural aspects that Brisha and Gayatri pointed out, which is you're in a campus where you're constantly working with your peers in different teams, in academic spheres, in cultural spheres, in co-curricular spheres, in sports. And it feels like women are both hyper visible and also our achievements are diminished on the same end by saying, oh, she's a girl, And I think Brisha can definitely speak about this from her side of being a sports secretary. But as a member of a sports team in my first year, I feel like people thought, oh, it's just one more person. The girls' team is so easy to get into. The guys' team is so hard. They have like so many people applying and they're just so much better. And it seems like we're not taken seriously on one hand because we're just women. On another hand, they're also like looking at our skill level and saying the same things. And similarly, this also plays out in terms of what sort of activities and spheres we want to explore in college. I feel like a lot of people are hesitant to join certain teams, to join specific activities, because it almost feels like, oh, I feel like that team will have only some 20 guys. Do I really want to subject myself to that? Like day in, day out? Like I might be really passionate about it, but do I really want to explore it with that team where I'll have to face all the issues that come with being one of the few members of a team? And then there's the reinforcement that comes from the other side, where many of these all male or concentration of male teams that are there, they'll also reinforce the idea that, oh, we'll have meetings at 3 a.m. We'll have to do all of these things late at night. We can't do it in the hostel if there are girls. We'll have to take it outside to other spaces. And while it starts off there, it sort of has a cascading effect on the decisions that you keep taking, both consciously and unconsciously, about your whole campus life.
So, Sankalpa, if I understand you correctly, let me separate two things, because I will come to the question of affirmative action and this question of invisibility in just a second. But right now, I want to focus on this hyper visibility of women as only particular kinds of subjects, as only visible for particular things. And Darwin, you had a hand up.
Gavin, you're muted.
Yeah. So what, adding to what Sankalpa and Brisha told initially, talking about the oppression, so it starts from very basic things, I guess. So we people think that girls do cry easily, right? It starts from there, right? It starts from right there. So again, coming from talking about the teams and entering and all those things, we have this also other side to look at, whether they will be able to handle or they'll be able to take it forward, and all this questioning starts from the other side of while doing selection itself. And there are a lot of places they will be forced to interact with external people or external things which we don't have in control at. In a lot of spheres, for example, in Culsec sphere or in HA sphere and all, they'll be talking with third party people and things goes out of. So there are a lot of things we look at, and we always doubt their capabilities, right? So still there are areas that we have to understand that they can also face it, they can also improve on those lines and all those things. Yes, yeah. So that is what I have to add on. Maybe we can deeply talk about these things a little later. Yes.
Just a question to expand on that, Darwin, right? So one of the things you said is, and part of it almost seems to be like what we started off saying. People may not have intentions, but they're not willing to go the extra mile to include, right? Or to be thoughtful. So people may not willingly say, let's keep women out of this, but they are not willing to go the extra mile to think about how it might be a problem should you have an all-male audience and you're having a meeting for the single female member at 3 a.m. So that's too much work, right? And we all know this, that inclusivity takes thoughtfulness. It does not come free. So we are talking about a mindset that is intentionally or obliviously cavalier. And somehow for women to be included, they have to go the extra mile and be like the boys, right? You have to always say, I can do everything that they're doing. 3 a.m., I am there. 4 a.m., I am there. 1 hour sleep, no problem. Sexist jokes, I will also crack them. Yeah, and we all know this. There is enough performance to do that. So in a sense, to the four of you, let me come to this question since Indu started off saying, we also want to know what to do about this. Do you think institutionally there is something we could do? And since Professor Vasa is also here, it's a great forum to ask this question. Yes, Brisha. And I'm speaking very specifically about the question of inclusivity and gender inclusivity, not neutrality, to be very clear.
Ma'am, actually, a couple of months ago, few of us, I think Darwin, Vishnu, who's also on call and wants to say something. So all of us, the secretaries, we all had a meeting, the executive wing, to discuss the same issue. So I really wanted, we understood, I think, the magnanimity of the issue in our own spheres, right? So I think the call started off with me initially talking about, all the issues on campus and everything. First, the other secretaries were I think they were a bit shocked that there were so many of them, which goes to say that a lot of us, even though we know our spheres in and out, right, like most of us too, but it was still difficult for them to imagine that, okay, yes, this is an issue. But after the conversation, they themselves started coming up with a lot of issues that they felt were part of their spheres. So I think what we came to the conclusion in that meeting was that every time that we would select a new team, with the help of the Women's Forum, we would have a initiation of sorts or a sensitization of sorts that would be done for the secretaries first. So we wanted to do it stepwise. So first it should happen for all the secretaries, so they are aware of all the problems that happen on campus, vis-a-vis, like based on that year. Like, it's because every year we want to progress, right? So it can't be the same issues that we talk about. So based on, say, the last year, whatever issues happened, We accumulate that. I mean, Women's Forum does that through their survey. We pick up on certain issues, and all the secretaries are trained themselves, right, to be able to handle this, to ensure it doesn't happen in their sphere. Second, the secretaries ensure that they give this information to their core teams, because all of us have, the heads for different teams under us. So they then pass on this information to the heads and sensitize the heads as to how do they ensure that their team, like, maintains the sort of gender neutral sort of space, right, and takes the extra mile step to include women or make them feel included at every step, whether it's orientation, whether it's the working, and whether if they want to apply again, those kind of things. And then the core team then goes into with their team and discusses this issue in and out to ensure it doesn't happen. I feel if we really go in a hierarchical step-by-step way, the reason I'm saying this is because if we have a workshop where people talk about it, like, trust me, no student wants to listen. They're being educated, okay?
Sure.
A lot of us have the tendency that we don't want to be educated. We think we know everything. So in a way where it's an open discussion like we're having now, if they could just, again, it's an extra step that everyone needs to take, but I think the executive wing would like to take it as well. So they would want to implement this in their own sphere so it doesn't happen. So, yeah.
So ground up gender sensitization abetted by the Women's Forum, right? And just to change, not gender neutral, but gender inclusive, because again, even though we tend to speak in binaries of men and women, I do want to think about LGBTQI plus audiences as well, who also have very specific gender related problems. So today, for want of imaginative capacity, we end up speaking in binaries all the time, but I want to sort of flag that for the moment. Sankalpa?
Yeah, I agree with what Bresha says, which is that there should be a push from the students, but I think it's equally important that the administration also starts talking more about these issues. And really, the message should be set on campus from the beginning, because a point that all of us reflected on was that a lot of this behavior is learned in our fresh year, in our first year. And while it would be helpful coming from secretaries, coming from teams, that's only still a fraction of the student body. There's a vast majority of people on campus who are not engaging with these groups, who may just be learning these behaviors from a small set of people they talk to. And so I think while all of these workshops and stuff may not resonate, I think repeated conversation and just keeping the conversation going and talking about it, bringing it up. And this is not only about, women issues or male issues, but LGBTQIA issues, and really giving a space for people who have these issues and who are facing these problems to also have them addressed, redressed, to have a safe space to have conversation. And I think that's something that was lacking before the Women's Forum came up. And it's now providing us this whole sphere where we can talk about all of these issues that are there. And it would be great, and I think it is, that it's going to be very inclusive to the LGBTQIA plus community as well. And really, we should give a platform, and the people who should be listening should not just be, the people in power in the student body, but also the administration, and there should be accountable action taken when there are problems, and grievance redressal should be taken very seriously. And that will really set the standard on campus for how seriously we take gender inclusivity.
Great. I'm coming to that. Still, number 2 and number 3 on my list are invisibility vis-a-vis affirmative action. And third is questions of violence, harassment, and redressal. So, well in line, everything in there. I want to close this set of discussions by saying we're speaking about an active culture of not only obliviousness to gender specificity or gender inclusivity, but an active culture of sexism of a certain kind, which should be addressed from day one, repeatedly, incessantly, relentlessly through conversation to establish a baseline. Would that be a fair summation? Okay, then let's move on to question number 2, which is this question of invisibility and affirmative action. The idea that you've gotten in because you're a girl and you're really not good enough, right? And how that doggedly follows you throughout your career. And I just want to interject here to Tarun's comment. Tarun, we are going to have other panels as well. like Indu just added, we already did a pre-panel with this set of panelists and we were spilling over. So we want to keep having these discussions and see points of overlap, but also points of difference. So yes, invisibility. Who wants to tell me more? Affirmative action, thoughts. What do you generally face in terms of general talk around affirmative action?
Okay, sorry, Sankalpa, I think you had to go.
So one conversation that comes up repeatedly is, even when we look at SMAIL, there seem to be so many. Okay, actually, I'll begin with the first step, which is the women's quota. And it was introduced while we were in our first year. So I think all of us belong to the last batch of students that came before the women's quota. And after that, we see that the students who come in benefit from this quota. So the conversation in campus around this centers around two issues. One, the fact that women think that this quota is somehow, not good for girls, because they feel that, oh, we're suddenly bringing gender into a sphere where gender does previously not exist, because they feel like merit is some sort of invisible to society. It's boxed, it's totally not related to all of the other conditions that influence this. So on one hand, they feel that their achievements, etc., are going to be downgraded or sort of looked down upon because of this quota. That women who get into IIT are benefited, given this push up, given this leg up by the women's quota. And even though the quota was implemented in such a smart way, where it's a supernumerary quota, where it's an additional seat for women and it's not taking away from the guys, people still have this feeling that guys are somehow missing out, they're not being helped in some way. And the second conversation on campus is that with this whole push for diversity and inclusion in companies and around the world, we see that there are lots of programs, especially from top multinational companies, which look for more women. And this you can see in terms of internships, in terms of opportunities, and all of this is shared on our common SMAIL portal. So there's this general feeling on campus where the guys feel like all the girls are suddenly being given a leg up. And it's only amplified when we sit for placements, when we sit for internships, by the fact that there are so few of us. So, they feel like there are already so few of them, and all of them are being given this leg up and this opportunity, but nobody acknowledges all of those sort of invisible barriers that we have gotten across to come to this space. The fact that we're studying in a campus where, often we've all been like the only girl in the room, the only girl in a team, the only girl in different spheres.
Sorry,
Gayatri has a hand up. Risha, do you want to add something?
Just a very different take, rather a question actually. So I totally get why companies, organize such women-centric either, seminars, pre-placement talks, all of such things. I personally, I'm on a little different take on that. I personally feel, yes, these are really well-intentioned events, but I feel they're setting the stage a little bit wrong, because I personally, okay, at least for me, maybe I am too privileged to be talking about it. Maybe I haven't faced what most women have faced as issues on campus, and maybe I'm talking as a bit of a privileged person probably, but I feel like these women quotas or these women things, right, like all of these, they're reinforcing it for me in my head, honestly, that you are getting it for that. Like, for example, when I was sitting for placements, the first thing somebody told me is, you're not competing with everyone, you're competing with the girls in your batch. And I'm just saying, maybe it's taken wrong. My only issue with these events, which are actually very good, that they should also have open ones. Like, they are conducting them only for women and not doing anything for open generic people. So what it comes off as is basically they're only giving a leg up to the other people. What about other people who lack information? There are so many people on campus who are not economically doing that well, okay, and they don't have access to resources. They do not have, and honestly speaking, they deserve a leg up more than I do. At least I believe so. Okay, And I have been a woman, I have faced gender, the backlash of being a woman in certain senses. I will also bring that up probably. But I personally feel like every time when I get something, that I really feel like I got it because I was a girl. I mean, I don't feel that way always, but certain things like, these women in finance summit conferences or all of that, right? There we've eliminated like 90% of the GSB, and I am competing against them. So I'm just saying it just sets a precedent in my head that, it's a women thing.
Gayatri, I have something to add to that. Gayatri, did you want to expand on that thought? Please go ahead. I'll speak later.
So a couple of things. I think when there is any attempt at affirmative action, there is some gap of information that is not bridged. Information about setting the context of why this is being done. First and foremost, we need to acknowledge the fact that IIT Madras started several decades ago, more than half a century ago. And then I think we had the first female student sometime in 1960s. It's been nearly 60 years since then for us to go from 0% to 13% organically. So how many more decades do we wait before we reach 50% representation, right? So a common argument that is brought up is, affirmative action, like providing seats is not the best way because there are other things you could be doing, but these things have simply proven to be inefficient over a span of more than half a century, number one. And number two, also communicating the intent. And I don't think people understand the gravity of the situation, right? So if only 13% of girls have made it to IIT Madras, it's because so many we have research studies to show that women aren't any less incompetent than guys. So there are other factors that are contributing to this. And people do not know what these issues are. I personally know stories of girls whose parents refused to finance their education simply because they were a girl. They were willing to do it for the brother, right? And she had to take the entire financial burden on herself. And basically, I feel like there will be short-term repercussions on both guys and girls, because it is true what she said. For instance, when I was preparing for my internships, I had somebody come tell me that you don't have to study at all. You're a girl. You're gonna get it. And that does seep into your head. No matter how hard you try to fight it, you would believe you got a position not because you were competent, but because you're a girl. And confidence goes a long way in boosting your performance. So it's just a vicious cycle. And but it simply having more women in an institute benefits other women who want to come inside. For instance, before I got into IIT, if I thought of an engineering college or an engineer, the first thing that comes to my mind is a male engineer, because that is what I see in pop culture. I did not know female seniors who had been in IITs or had taken up engineering, etc. So just having more role models gives that extra push. There are so many advantages that come from just being having more women on campus. It also makes the infrastructure within the institute also, I guess, more suited to have women. So that is another point. And also on how it is received, it is surprising. So like within campus, these are some things we see around us, but also I have my brother who's currently studying in 12th standard, and he's in a coaching institute. So he was telling me about how his friends genuinely believe that did not know that the seats were extra, that the instructors and coaching institutes actively pit girls against guys and tell the guys that these girls are taking away your seats, so you better work for it. And they think their seats are being taken away. They don't know that the number of seats have been increased. So that goes to build that whole negative perception around this. And yeah, I mean, that's it for now, I guess.
I'll come back to what you both are saying. Darwin, you have had a hand up for a while, and then Risha again.
Yes, ma'am. So, like, whatever to add on the points with Gayatri and Brisha spoke. So, I wanted to bring in the other perspective also, right, to make this discussion easier. So, talking about Gayatri talk about the 0 to 13% organic growth and stuff. Yeah, really agree that still it can be improved, but there are few the other side of it, right, ma'am. So, let's talk about teaching sphere or medicine or some arts sphere where there are again higher set of girls percentage or women's percentage is being noticed.
So that
Okay,
is
Gayatri
actually
saying
good
it.
to
Yeah,
know.
yeah. So
Okay,
I'll come.
statistically, even if you look at medicine, there are fewer female professionals. The number of girls dropping out of college just increases with time. And even in other spheres, it's always girls performing better than guys in a lot of places, but never really going on to pursue further education and taking up a job in that.
And I would
Across
say
all spheres,
let's stick
women
to
are
the context
underrepresented.
for now,
Sorry.
because
Yeah.
medicine has a slightly different story also, depending on which specialization is seen as a female
Yeah,
one and which is seen as a male one. Surgery as opposed to gynecology. So, let's keep that out of the
yes,
discussion
ma'am.
for a
So
second, Darwin. But I really want to hear what you have to say in terms of within IIT.
yeah, with an idea, exactly, ma'am. So the coming to this, whatever the Prisha started with, this internship and things, like the problems that we face. So generally, it starts with the ratio of 6:1 in the campus right now. There are 6 boys for 1 girl, right? So when coming to placement and things, I just wanted to put in the boys' perspective what they generally feel about this topic. So we talk about equality and everyone is putting enough equal number of fight, and at least we are trying to create a equal opportunities for people inside it. So when this companies come up with this mindset of 1:1 ratio of picking up, they are really getting demotivated at that point, right? So they also put in enough effort, and at least inside institute you have equal opportunity, right? At least that's what we are trying to achieve right now, right? So in that case, when you talk about this equal opportunity at that point and whatever the facilities we are accessing inside is almost equal, right? In that case, that's where we people put we are kind of very down, putting us down. So this one thing very important issue that everyone talks about it every day of their institute life, right? So this is something which I have to add on this internship part. And again, Brisha being the sports secretary, she might know a bit more. Again, in sports also we have this discrimination for girls, saying that okay, getting into sports team is very easy for a girl, right? Being a boy,
Not discrimination for girls, Darwin, affirmative action.
yes. uh yeah, maybe I worded wrong, but what I wanted to put in is still this is something what we assume or whatever we think is kind of wrong, where they have put in enough, where we forget to um, give importance to their efforts, right? So to be in the team or whatever they are trying to do in their NC life, they are also putting enough efforts. So just what we just say is, just being a girl in NC, it's very easy to get into sports team or different specific areas, right? So
All you have to do is be a girl.
yeah, exactly. So we are not recognizing their efforts. That is something
Sure.
wrong on the other part,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
So
No,
we
I appreciate what you're saying. I think it's an honest assessment of why there is resentment on campus. I mean, we don't want to get into is it right or wrong. Everybody thinks this way. We are not equipped to say right or wrong at this point.
yeah, exactly. So what I want to say is exactly it's about the efforts that each individual is putting inside his ministry. That has to be recognized, right? It's not in terms of see, one side boys are getting slight advantage, one side girls are getting advantage. It's fine, but it's about the entire effect of efforts of the individual, right? That's what it entirely matters. So that culture has to be start building up from the people. You have to start looking at their efforts and things. Yes.
Okay. I will come and summarize that as well. Sankalpa and then Brisha.
Yes. So it seems like for a lot of guys on campus, diversity and inclusion is something that they would agree is correct. They would agree that affirmative action is important, but as long as we don't take their seats, as long as it works out for them, it's not them who sort of, lose out on this bargain of sorts. It's almost like they see that if women get more of these seats, etc., it means lesser for them. And I feel like they don't think about what happens after. You know, if you're working in a team, if you're working in a company which has, let's say, equal representation of genders, and how they benefit from those experiences where they can learn from all of these other different perspectives that they don't have before, where teams aren't unidimensional, and how affirmative action for women or one gender that isn't just important for that gender, but it's important for the organization as a whole, but also for the privileged males in the organization in terms of their experiences in teams, in terms of how they learn, in terms of their interpersonal relations and interactions. And that sort of attitude or aspect just doesn't arise, and it doesn't organically arise because of a lot of reasons on campus. But I think it would be important to sort of bring this other perspective that they also benefit by having more women or other genders around.
Okay, I think we may be going round and round a little bit, and we are soon going to spill over without discussing very important things. So let me just, I see you, Brisha, and I also saw what Amog said on the chat and you responded to. So let me also highlight that, right? We're discussing two parallel things over here. One is, of course, the sense of individual competition and the seeming fiction that once you enter the IIT campus, there is gender neutrality. Everybody puts in the same effort. So it's the same starting line. Therefore, anything that a woman gets over here is by virtue of being a woman because there's affirmative action. So there is that perception, which again may not correspond to reality at all and badly affects the confidence of women applicants. So that's one side of the story. The second side is what Amog is saying that we are discussing the standard critique against any kind of affirmative action, that the creamy layer gets the benefits of it. It's women who are well off that are getting access to this kind of supernumerary affirmative action, and real recipients lose out. What about men of lower classes and castes who would otherwise have had access to these seats? Now, this is the standard sort of trade-off between the kind of facets of affirmative action, right? One, I'm not sure that bears out. I'm not sure that bears out that the women who are well off are the only ones who are getting access to this. I'm not even sure if we have supporting evidence for that. Two is exactly what Sankalpa is saying. How is it that we change sexist cultures in organizations? Put the bodies there. The only way you're going to address it ground up is if people begin to say more women there who say just by virtue of being there that our experiences are slightly different. You cannot have the same 10% screaming over and over again and any kind of special things being given to them. You have to have structural change in the numbers, which is also what is part of the ongoing initiative from alumni at IIT, which is a women leading IIT initiative, which is how to do this structurally and culturally. So perhaps with the affirmative action, we keep going round and round the same points without actually talking about it. Can we say ground up, there is affirmative action? Given that there is affirmative action, what can we do to abet cultures of non-resentment, inclusivity, and camaraderie? One of the problems, of course, is this kind of hyper competition for the highest salaries. And who do we get to blame the moment somebody doesn't get something? And the usual characters are, of course, all the marginal ones, right? The ones who have come in an affirmative action, the ones you see as not one of us. A cultural change must accompany affirmative action to address both any kind of misconceptions as well as individual resentment, which is not entirely, if you breed a competitive atmosphere, you will also breed resentment when people don't get what they're promised. We need an institutional cultural change. So for the last set of comments on affirmative action, can I ask each one of you, not just in terms of what is the problem, but how would you address it? Just not in terms of solve it for me, give constructive criticism, but what do you think would be a good first step? Yes, please.
Yeah, so actually, just very quickly going over exactly what you said, I feel that this resentment, right, that comes up because of the ways we're conducting, like, this, say, this reservation of seats, or the supernumerary seats in this case. But whatever, like Amog also said that, these are people who are actually like more the creamy layer who are getting it. One way it's actually helping others is because they believe now that, okay, no, I have a certain number of seats I can fight for. A lot of parents in a lot of homes don't allow people to fight for, say, engineering because of the low acceptance rate. But given that they have a certain set of seats, at least they're allowed to compete now. And like you said, I mean, actually, I agree with Amok that maybe today 90% of the people, 99% of the people who are getting these seats come from coaching institute, come from good homes, right, who are taking this. But maybe the 1% at least have gotten in, which they wouldn't have because of this push. But coming back to something more different, I think when, like Gayatri mentioned, right, like on campus, we have very less, like we have 13% women today. Now, I genuinely have this question. I feel we have to address the problem. Like, I think the conversation is more about on campus than getting into the campus for now. Okay, so obviously it is a superset, like I understand, but I'm saying ki once people get in, you're 13% women in the institute, like Darwin mentioned, and the people who are applying, so most of these companies, multinationals, right, the said multinationals who are coming to hire people who want equal ratios, they genuinely, I think the majority of them come on day 1 and day 2 of placements. And to be very honest, their screening process, okay, includes things like PORs, things like wherein people have done stuff in the institute, right? It is women who have found a way to break out of the shell and represent themselves. But honestly speaking, if you really look at the numbers, the number of women fighting for the 50% seats that they are offering versus the number of men fighting for the 50% of the seats, honestly, I feel like 1:1 ratio is genuinely unfair because the people getting it, okay, like these jobs or internships or whatever, like somebody who has gotten an intern out of Insti, right? I personally don't see, I have faced, like I said, I have faced gender discrimination, but I don't see why it should be a 1:1 for me, honestly, right? And I know I may
Risha,
be
we can't
privileged.
address, I mean, we can't go to D&I policies of corporations on this panel, right? As much as I'd
So
like to
that is
solve that
true.
too. I'm
That
saying, in a
is,
sense, I'd like to address the cultures of this kind of resentment and, hitting at people's confidence on campus. I think the D&I question is a much larger one.
yeah.
And that's something we can talk about separately. I will bat for both sides of it, honestly, but I want to ask from you this culture of belittling affirmative action candidates on campus. What can we do about that?
So the one thing I was coming to is the fact that this resentment. So to be very honest, so like Gayatri, like when I mentioned the same thing in the room, she was my roommate. So when I mentioned this to Gayatri that, I feel this is unfair, what she told me is you are not able to see like all the problems that people actually face, women actually face. To be honest, I realized seeing problems I was facing because of this conversation I had with Gayatri, right? Now, the thing is, a lot of people, I think, here do not see those problems. And I'm glad we're having this conversation for that purpose. But in general, I do agree that like a lot of problems go unnoticed just because enough people don't talk about it. And because we have adapted to this behavior that it's okay. Like this is natural and this is everyday life, right? We don't even realize it's wrong. So I think, yes, talking about it, like Sankalpa said, in the fresh year, we should really have workshops. So we have GN classes, right? I think skills GN classes. So we should probably talk about that in those forums and not as a workshop, but more as an implemented thing. So like more gamification oriented, more situation based, where you're putting people in various situations, seeing how they react and then calling them out. Maybe this can be changed a little bit. I feel that would probably help.
Okay, so gender specific orientation, gamification, role play, so on and so forth, and active investment in gender relations and trying to understand different gender experiences. Gayatri?
Yes, ma'am. I think a very inflammatory point was made about how we may not be deserving of the affirmative action. So I just want to address that by saying that number one, if first of all, we can't say put a blanket and say that no women from progressive households do not face gender discrimination. They do. They do not want to admit it, maybe to themselves also, but simply the fact that let's say you do not have the same kind of mobility that your brother does, plays a major role. It affects the kind of decisions you make about where you go to intern or which university do you go study. You don't end up going abroad because maybe your parents weren't comfortable with the idea of that, but they were comfortable with the idea of your brother going abroad.
I understand this, Gayatri. I'm
Yes,
only going to say, I'm going to interrupt
Okay,
you
sorry,
just
ma'am.
because in the end it'll end up sounding like first world problems, right? And
Yes, ma'am.
I know that's easy charge to make when somebody says, oh, I couldn't go abroad. They're like, really? That's your problem that you couldn't
Yes,
go
ma'am.
abroad? So in a sense, I'm saying let's start from the baseline that we have affirmative action,
Okay, ma'am.
right? For
Yes,
good reasons, we have it. There's been a thought through process, it's been implemented. How do we make sure that it's understood in a productive, constructive fashion so that everybody can participate in a gender inclusive culture? That's the solution at work.
I think the first step would be to just create awareness about the problems that people have. For instance, a lot of people cannot wrap their heads around the idea that women need this. Even though if you were really to dig up the statistics and do your research, you would see that, yes, we do need it. And everybody, it doesn't have to be only the poorer sections of the population, but just having representation from any section of the population goes a long way in bringing up the entire demographic of women. So just grounding that idea in everybody's head, so that, and that is so that, one, everybody accepts it, the outsiders accept it. Number two, the women themselves accept that they are deserving of it, so that they can make full use of the opportunities that are presented to them.
So that's a tough one though, Gayatri. I mean, and here's a word I want to throw into the mix. It's something called intersectional feminism, right? This is something that I think is important for gender sensitivity as well, which is to understand that gender also intersects with caste and class, which is just by being a woman doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be deserving. But as I said, affirmative action is a complex thing. There is a gender quota. How do we work with it to make sure of the other side also? The resentment faced by people that may come from difficult economic and social circumstances. How do we bring everyone along? And I'm just throwing it out there because it's a longer question in that sense, and we need to think about that as well. Two, how will women feel confident? I'm not very sure. Like, I'm always that one person who's invited to every panel. Right? I'm always the token female who's just like, we need a woman. Can you come in tomorrow and speak about this? And then I have to read up furiously. And my tack over the years has been, I accept, I just go. I understand that I am not the best person. If they'd done a little bit more work, they would have found a woman who is of much better expertise to do this. But I go anyway, because I feel like just representation as a warm body over there means that some woman is seen as being able to do the work. So I think part of the responsibility for women who come in also is to actively produce a gender inclusive atmosphere on campus. There is a responsibility that comes with it, to not be taken along with the culture of individualism and competition, right? To propagate more awareness of other kinds of issues as well. Sankalpa, I'd said my piece, sorry.
Sorry, I forgot what I was going to say.
Sorry, you had your hand up and I went on and on. My apologies.
I forgot what I was going to say.
Shall I come back to you when it flashes back? Risha?
So I actually have a very different point to bring up, but I'm not sure if we're talking about that yet, which is the problem of sexual harassment on campus.
Right after this, topic number 3 coming up, which is what this is the exciting point at which I want to sort of end this discussion today before we run over time. I am coming to one that is so obviously a problem, both in terms of its prevalence as well as culture of speaking about it, questions of confidence. So, but shall we sort of summarize this part of this discussion in affirmative action to say that one of the ways to really talk about it is to talk about it, is to bring it up very obviously instead of letting people speak about it in back corridors, to speak about it in orientation, to speak about how to be courteous towards your colleagues of a certain kind, how to lend courtesy and help instead of just competition.
Just one last thing to add to just that. I feel the source of information also really matters, like who is delivering the information. Because a lot of us, like I said again, right, how many of us genuinely listen to orientations? We just go there, listen to the team we want, and that's it, right? I feel how like passing information is really essential, but how you're doing it. Now, there's a very small thing. Like, for example, I really like the work Women's Forum is doing, but I don't know, again, I don't know statistics wise, but how many men follow Women's Forum? People just believe it is for women, right? So creating awareness amongst women may not help, and it has to go beyond. And it's not nothing, it's not our fault, right? It's almost like we just need them to realize this is also for them. So the source really matters of the information.
Let's put Darwin on the spot and ask him how.
Darwin.
I missed the last 2 minutes of this conversation. I'm really
how do we make more men, male identified students follow gender inclusivity as active work to be done, or the work of the Women's Forum? So Brisha is asking a question as to how to communicate this. A Women's Forum keeps saying this, we produce a certain echo chamber, and those are the same people that listen to it all the time. How do we bring men along? So allyship, really, that's the question.
Ma'am, this is something, it's a responsibility that every student has to take in, but coming about how to reaching out students or how to educate them is something which we can start from the fresh year. As I said, we are coming in as a void people about things, right? We don't have much idea here. So maybe all the teams they are going to start with, or freshie orientation, or the role plays, it's general, right? So it's better to train them when they are void, right? When they are very less, right? After growing second year, third year, it's very difficult for them to make them understand and all those things. They just build on their thought process and things, right? So initially, if we take the steps in this early, but then we might have a progress in 2 3 years. I think it's a long-term process rather than saying it in a 1 or 2 events which will take it. It's a very long-term process where slowly a percentage of people should increase. That's what it's the possibility I can see, but it's actually happening now. So when I was in first year, the number of people who understand about this problem, who talk about this problem, is very less, because I didn't hear about it at all, right? No one was talking about it, right? So now in my fourth year, looking at all the juniors and people and things, it has improved. People are just growing. I think we are in the right direction. Just constantly educating them from their budding process will make a impact in few years. That's the entire picture I want to.
Two other additional questions for you, Darwin. One, how did you come to a point of recognizing gender inclusivity personally? I mean, is this something that you experienced as a culture of sexism at IITM and there was a transformation at some point, or were you just out of that entire miasma? That's my question number one. And two is really, everybody's happy to be gender inclusive until it comes for their jobs, right? Until there's something to give up in the process of including gender. So, I mean, any kind of inclusivity entails a sacrifice of existing privileges. You can't not move from your place if some change has to occur. So if you could just respond briefly to both questions. How did you come to this? And how will people be convinced that you have to give a little bit for a better sort of society to speak of?
Yes, ma'am. So coming to this first question, how did I get to know? So initially, in my first year, seriously, I have zero idea about what is gender sensitivity and what this people talk about, what is feminism and all. I literally had zero idea. And I don't know the actual purpose also, what they are trying to achieve in terms of this feminism. So this was the very major question, but I was light on that part. But this PR culture, again, when I started going into the teams and all those things, the two questions that started coming up. In terms of team selection and all those things, they had always this ratios maintaining and looking into people whether they will be capable enough or they will be able to do it. All those things. When it started, I was like, okay. Then it initially triggered. And the second part is while interacting with all this girls and things and all in my second year, I also understood that whatever their small actions they are doing, they will portray it very big, right? So a girl talking to 4 boys is something bad. They portray in a very wrong way, right? So if I sit with 5 girls and talk, that is not an issue for any of the boys. But once a girl talks with 5 boys or things in a gang, that it becomes a very big issue, right? So then there's
Hey, we are gender progressive here. At least we're all allowed to, boys and girls are allowed to talk to each other. What are you saying?
yeah, yes, ma'am. But though though it's
No,
still
but I totally get him. Like I've totally faced that before. So
yeah. So actually this is the point, two parts. Okay, so some at one point we are starting to judge girls, right? So when you're starting to judge girls in all their things, right, then comes in their representation and what are the issues they are starting facing. and, and they literally go into big trauma, man, when all these boys talk about wrong if they're being actually good enough. So then I realized, okay, so we have to understand things what they are going through in the sensitive life, and they're missing out in a lot of things just because they can't enter into that, right? So this is where the point it started. Then I was like, okay, things has to progress and people should start understanding their perspectives as well, right? So that is one point when I started involving these kind of conversation and getting to know about these things. And the third thing is, uh, while I'm standing for hostel affairs security, I wanted to know the culture in the hostel. Okay, what are the pain points of the students, what they face, which I can make it better, right? In terms of interaction between boys and girls and how it can be done, like common places. See, still we talk about this common place for boys and girls to sit and discuss things during night times and all those things. Still we are lacking at that, and a lot of girls feel very uncomfortable going into boys hostel for any kind of their study purposes or any competition purposes and all. It's still the problem persists, right? So then I thought, okay, there are a lot of avenues we can still optimize, increase from whatever from my end I can give, right? So that's how it all started. This thing, this is my first part of this question, right? I think hope I gave a better picture about it. Yes, yeah. And now the second part of the question, what I just lost.
I was saying in terms of inclusivity, right? Everybody's okay to do small cultural changes and do, all sorts of, yeah, we are cool like that, except when it comes to, speaking to the
Yes,
money,
yes,
right? When something comes for their jobs, nobody's willing to give up anything to change the status quo.
ma'am. Actually, come talking about inclusivity. See, I took several interviews for my teams and all, right? So the general first question that comes to my mind is the things has to go smooth, right? As in, to create a team, I wanted everything to go smooth inside the team, right? So I have no issues in including girls and things and all. A lot of people doesn't have any problem in including girls as such. So what if you include, what are the impacts you get, what are the additional problems you have to face? So they have to be well prepared on that. So when someone is taking a team, let's say I'll give my sphere as an example. There's some every people talk about, right? So in monitoring, one major vertical in my sphere is monitoring messes and things. So where coordinator or super coordinator has to talk to different people like caterer, vendors, and take all the criticism from the students in every part, right? So will that be okay for her and all those things which starts that question? Will the process be smooth? I think majority of the people are okay to include. They are very happy to include girls as such. The only thing they feel about is the additional problems which might arise of including. But I think still we have to give the choice to the girls whether she's ready to take it up or not. So that's what inclusivity actually in terms of an institute, people are ready to do that. But other factors, other X factors is kind of stopping people to take this bigger call.
X factor.
Yeah.
Okay, we will make a repertoire of X factors at the end of this discussion because they're threatening to, exceed the ABC factors almost. Thank you, Darwin. Sankalpa, you've had your hand up for a while, and then Brisha, closing comments on this set of discussions before we move on to questions of harassment.
Yes. So coming to the resentment regarding affirmative action policies on campus, I feel like a way in which the message is sort of being packaged and communicated itself has bad rep. And it's probably starts from there, and that sort of breeds extra resentment. And I think a way in which this can be packaged better is to really put the statistics out there. I feel like this is a place where people appreciate numbers. And even though we may say, women face these problems, Brisha keeps bringing this up, I don't have the stats, but, this is sort of my experience. And I really think putting numbers to it and putting the notion of a collective set of problems that people are facing will really change the way it's perceived. Because, people don't intentionally want to not include. They're, open to diversity and inclusion, but I feel like they're just not understanding the messages right, like even with the supernumerary quota. So I just feel like we need to change the way we are conveying this information and include more statistics, include the number of women who are actually making it to IIT, the number who join different companies, different placements, and how many actually stay. And while the question of privilege is also important here, because all of this is not happening in some contained chamber outside of society, and even though it may initially be, privileged in terms of caste and economic status, women who are getting access to these opportunities, it sort of still means that there are suddenly more women who are getting these opportunities compared to before. And that's no mere small feat, because that is also inclusion that is important. And while other forms of inclusion are also definitely important, I don't think discarding one on the basis of the other is very productive. Rather, we should strive for all forms of inclusion, and it may just begin here. This is only the starting point, and that should be conveyed. It's not just, today it may be, 75% of the women who are accessing this policy and who may be benefiting maybe from privileged sections, but only if we push for more such policy level decisions like this will there be more women who can actually come in and access these opportunities.
I'm only going to add one word to that, Sankalpa, to say that, yes, I absolutely think presenting the information is important. Perhaps even tracking the results of affirmative action over the years, because technically the goal of affirmative action is to get to a point where it's not needed anymore. So one, tracking it, two, deepening it so that it's intersectional, that it's not purely on the basis of gender, but intersections of gender, class, caste, as the case may be, and constantly communicating that information to the audience as well. Risha, last words on this before we move on to harassment with a capital H.
Yeah, so a very, very quick thing. Actually, I really agree to whatever Sankalpa said, and I totally believe that stats are very important. But it's a very different take, actually, based on what you said, right? How do we get men to give up their jobs, like give up something before they achieve, achieve the higher purpose of sorts? But honestly, I feel jobs is like pushing it, because people don't give up even small things like comfort. So very small incident, like for example, I was giving a fresher orientation as the sports secretary just a couple of months back. And in that orientation, one boy, and it really threw me off in the presentation, okay, because you're giving this presentation to them, for them, and all of that. And one boy spoke about something about my voice and how my voice was good, or in a certain way. And the thing being, it's such a ridiculous statement, and it's so objectified that at that moment I didn't expect it, right? You're in this whole swing that you're giving away orientation and all of that, and then I saw that statement, and a couple of people just attested to it, rather than, and it wasn't in the sense they weren't making fun of me. They were probably talking of my voice in a certain different way, right? In a way that is not comfortable for them to be talking about. And it threw me off so bad. And yet not a single person on that chat told that boy that what you're doing is wrong. Okay. And this is a very small thing, right? Like in an orientation, just imagine if a fresher had, nothing. I totally believe in across batch, all of that, no seniority and all that. But like if a fresher who's 1 month into the institute could say that to the sports secretary on a public forum, what all would he say to a generic person in his class, right? Or when there's nobody around to see. So the point being, and nobody raised their voice. I feel this happens a lot. Like, when we're just talking in a group and something wrong has been said, something wrong has been said. Forget girls taking a stand, okay? Like, I know of, like, say during my election time, a lot of people were talking about how I did stuff to get certain people to support me. Okay. And in this conversation, I had friends. Okay. And those friends didn't raise their voices against me. I mean, for me, how can I expect that, like forget jobs. I mean, if you cannot raise your voice in such a place, right, how do you expect them to give up jobs? Like, I feel like this is the starting step.
I agree. I think there's an active culture of courtesy, respect, camaraderie, and friendship that needs to be furthered, including active allyship from women and men to say what forms of behavior are permissible, what forms of behavior are not. There are boundaries, and this boundary making needs to happen as a culture as to what can be said in public forums to people. I mean, this is sort of an active culture of trolling, right? Which is you have an opinion, you spit it out. It does not matter what the forum is. Unless there is power attached to the scenario, nobody seems to care. Unless your grades are actively affected, forms of behavior are not condoned in a certain way. So I think there is an active answer there, which is an active culture of allyship, standing up for people's rights. Sorry, my dog is going a little berserk in the bag. Yes. Anybody want to add to this discussion before we move on? Any last words on this question of allyship?
Ma'am, can you also talk about how women can be allies to each other?
Sorry, tell me again.
How women can also support each other.
Please, I mean, I would say that's a no-brainer, given that it's 13% and should actively, but often you find that a culture of competition means that women think power exists in behaving in a fashion that is more akin to a brohood than a sisterhood, right?
Yes, ma'am. And even women are not willing to listen when they are called out for the same things you would want to call guys out for.
No, absolutely. And I think part of it very much comes from a lot of fragile egos walking around, right? Nobody's allowed to call out anybody for any kind of behavior. How could you be wrong? And in a place like IIT, that becomes doubly problematic because you are the creme de la creme, to say the least. So yes, allyship, calling out people. I think there is a certain amount of something that has not been said at all, which I think is very difficult in a place like IIT. Basic kindness towards each other, to give courtesy and to be kind towards each other and understand that everybody is belaboring a set of problems and not everybody is out to get everybody else. So courtesy stemming from the capacity to show kindness to each other. And part of it is institutional culture. I think for those of us here who represent the institution, this is also a note to us to be kind to all stakeholders in the institute, to always be courteous, to always watch language, to not exert power when power is available. That's only a note to self. Let's move on to a much more powerful question, which is, yes, Gayatri?
Sorry, ma'am, just minor point. But also when you talk about calling out, I don't know. I do not know how to call somebody out, be it a guy or a girl who is saying something. I disagree with it. I want to disagree with them, but I do not want to antagonize them. And I often do not know the best way of going about it. So it comes at a personal cost. So.
That's a hard one, Gayatri. I don't have much to say. Sankalpa.
Just quickly adding on to what Gayatri says, I feel like there's so much onus on women to call out behavior, when we see it in groups, like we feel it, but it just takes so much effort, even when we try to do it, just figuring out how to say it. And then engaging in those conversations can actually be really annoying, if not to the point where it's super triggering, where the people don't fully listen to what you have to say, don't actually engage with your points, but just try to throw a contra perspective. And, it's almost like they're just trying to trip you up. And at some point you get to the stage where it almost feels like it's not worth engaging for your own sake of sanity, to say the least. And this sort of behavior just means that it's usually never worth the effort to call it out, to have that conversation, to take that step, even if you know that you should probably speak up.
A lot of collective angst in the room. I have sage-like advice to give you. One, calculate how much energy you have and choose your battles every day. Two, be resigned to fighting battles every day. Like that stupid t-shirt slogan says, well-behaved women rarely make history. Right? So choose your battles, preserve your energy. But I also think the question of what Gayatri is saying, how do I do it without offending people? Well, this is the thing. Offense is available to be taken by others. Right? You have to figure out after some point of time what you want to be included in. Do you want to be included in abetting certain forms of behavior? The least you can say is, I do not agree with this. I am not party to this. I am not going to be included in these forms of behavior. What others do is beyond your purview. But saying that, I think, is really important just to make sure that opposing voices are heard. Part of building a progressive culture on campus is to say we can disagree and not hate each other. We can absolutely disagree. At some point of time, we might converge or completely diverge, but it's possible to be different and live together. And this is a lesson that we all badly need to learn. With that sage advice, Brisha, I'm going to cut your raised hand short and get to the question of harassment because we are spilling over time. We're already at 8:40 people. Indu, how are we doing on time? Indu, if you're here.
I don't know. The audience are still with us. We have
which is great.
Same numbers.
Okay.
Even on YouTube. So maybe, yeah, we can go another 20 minutes, maybe.
Okay. Sounds good. So let me make very, very specific questions because this is an issue we all agree exists on campus. So I don't think we have to produce statistics to prove that harassment is a rampant problem. Instead, I'm going to ask you to pass out 3 instances in your own experience, either having been narrated to you or you personally experienced, if you're comfortable sharing it, of large harassment, medium harassment, and small harassment. It's like the 3 bears. Brisha?
Okay, so I'll be very honest. Okay, so while we all know that sexual harassment happens on campus, I think none of us, like Sankalpa said, the numbers are super important to understand the issue. None of us realize the extent of it. And here I'm not even talking about, see, first of all, there are no minor offenses. Honestly, everything is a major offense, but in the very crux of, let's just take major offense as rape. Okay, very honestly speaking, I realized the statistic, in fact, this number just a couple of days back, probably a week ago, and it has shocked me after that to no extent. Honestly, because in a group, like I'm just saying, like in a group of say 7 girls or 9 girls, right? There were 5 out of these 7 who had faced sexual harassment on campus. And these are people, I can tell you that all of us know, right? My point being, if that number is not scary, then I don't know what is. 5 out of 7 in your own circle of people that you probably know at some level, right? It's a very scary number. Okay, and you know, most of these people don't come out and talk. I'm just saying ki the number of cases, that rape cases that go to CCASH are like much lesser than the ones that happen. Honestly, the number of cases that people even talk to their friends about are much lesser. And it is so beyond shocking that on a campus in IIT Madras, where it's, you know, the most premier like institute, and we have how do you say, we have the most educated population, right, on campus. And in spite of that, the perpetrators of majority of these crimes are actual students studying on our campus that we can do nothing about. Because you know what, to be very honest, as much as we say that it is smart to call out, it is in fact, you need to be the voice, you need to raise your voice and call out these people. It's very difficult because in our society today, you are going to be branded as, even if you have done a lot right in life, you will be branded as the girl something happened to. And it's a very scary step to ask people, like honestly saying, from personal experiences or friends or whatever, right, to ask them to call it out. Because a lot of people, it's not because they're scared to call it out, it's because they don't want to be labeled as that. And so many people walk free because nobody is ready to take a ready to go and tell something. And these people, these perpetrators, I know, have recommitted crimes because they weren't called out the first time. And if that is not a scary thought, I really don't know what is. Because I mean, I'm just saying, firstly, and the second thing is, we actually today, I mean, I understand that Ccash is trying its best to do, what it's trying to do. But to be honest, today, we have nothing on campus for these women who really want to, not only women, I'm sure men as well, like Gayatri said, right, have issues. There is nothing on campus to really systematically and in a very efficient manner tackle this. Like, purely from personal experience.
Let me ask a very important question here, Brisha. So are you telling me that in many cases, and I know Hema is on this call as well, that Ccash included, the mechanisms on campus for ensuring anonymity of anybody who complains, are those mechanisms ineffective?
I feel like the entire process, I'm really sorry again to be this blunt, but I personally, from my own experience, feel the process is very ineffective, honestly. And that maybe the anonymity is not ineffective, right? But it just makes you not trust the whole system as a whole. So you just don't want to put your faith in their hands.
Okay, let me ask you a very specific question since you're speaking about the question of process. I'm just going to say a host of things on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being least effective, 10 being most effective. How would you rate this as part of the mechanisms? Anonymity?
Okay, anonymity, probably, if you're just taking it as that issue, probably 8. I don't think that's a professor run thing. So I don't feel like it comes out so much. But
okay. Respect?
Respect in the sense?
Respect for the person who is a respectful behavior towards the person who is complaining.
No, that I would agree is again 8 and 9, because yes, there is a bad intention towards it. Yeah.
Okay, but in a sense of, counseling?
Very low.
Okay. So now we're getting to the crux of the problem, right? Because part of the thing is mechanisms do exist. Even if I look at the mechanisms, I know that lots of things are checked off. So you're saying that anonymity is good, respect towards the person is good, counseling very low.
Very low.
Right? Communication.
I would just like to add one thing. Respect towards the issue, like I said, it's well intentioned, right? So you respect the person, but respect to the issue is the way you deal with it and how much progressive action proactive action you take.
I'll come to that. I'm just breaking it down in a modular fashion so that even as an institute, we know where is it that action needs to be taken.
Yeah.
Right.
I think respect for the issue is very low.
Okay. Respect for the issue itself is very low. Counseling, very low. Communication.
Communication as in between the two parts, like between Ccash and the complainant, or?
Yes, between the body to which.
Low again.
Yes, low again. Okay. Regularity of updates. Confidence. Instilling confidence in the complainant.
Very low.
Okay. This is something that I think ought to be taken note of, really, because if the process is in place, unless it's robust, people are not complaining, or at least the perception of the process not being robust is leading to people not speaking up. So thank you, Brisha, for that. And in your experience, 5 out of 7 people in your immediate circle have experienced some form of sexual harassment.
Not some form, I'm talking about rape. And I think that is a huge issue.
Okay.
Like, imagine the number of girls who have then faced just, little minor this thing. It's super.
No, I'm with you. There is no minor thing. It was a trick question. There is sort of no minor sense of harassment. Any unsafe campus is an unsafe campus. Darwin, can I ask you to come in next and speak about what your understanding of this question of harassment on campuses?
Yes, ma'am. So this is something I can just tell about. Personally, I haven't faced anything from this sort, and whatever I can see from the other side, again coming into the other perspective, what I can tell is, see, again, it's starts from basic what Disha was telling before, in terms of giving a comment and all those things, right? In terms of let's say in a team, they give bad comments, and there's no one to stand up against them. Like, even
agreed. No, Darwin, I think we have come to the point where, like they say in Hindi, pani sar ke upar se chala gaya. We've just come to the point of asking really as to, okay, harassment, capital H. Until now, we are talking about active cultures. I think our first point of inflection will have to be to addressing harassment on campus as something that something can immediately be done about. So in your understanding, what is the seriousness of the issue? How can you, if you can illustrate it?
Ma'am, talking about the seriousness, harassment, it's a very big thing. But getting in my perspective, seriously, I haven't known the process at all. To be very frank, seriously, I don't know how to complain also, first of all, what direction they have to go through. And
Or how many people have testified to you that they've experienced forms of harassment where you've seen how serious it is? How many people have shared this with you, men, women?
First of all, a lot of people are very restricted to share these kind of things with boys, at least. That is the first thing. But I have heard few instances from few people. That's what, out of 10 people, only 2 people share it out. First, the main problem is they don't have the courage to go and complain. They just have to keep it within themselves, and that is the very big problem, I guess. So first of all, we have to give in the confidence that okay, you are, in terms of everything, the parameters, whatever you listed out, it's actually, it sounded really good, and we have to put in the confidence in the people, right? And as Brisha said, almost 70% of the people are faced. And one other problem, what I feel is 20 to 30% of the people, like whoever I've talked to, they don't understand what is harassment, first of all, right? They just think the extreme case as harassment, right? It starts from very basic also. And even
So
why I'm
stalking is just love.
and why I'm saying this is, you can connect it to the other side, right? So even boys should know the limitations, right? So a lot of boys think that whatever they're doing is wrong. They don't know, they think whatever they're, it's usual, right? So that is also one important thing in this process, like um, understanding your limitations and what you're doing is wrong. In both sides you have to educate, in terms of girls and in terms of boys. This is one thing. And also, this is something I think I've talked about with Gayatri also, like out what how we can make this thing transparent, like what kind of complaint as we have recorded and what actions we have taken, right? Such that people know that we are taking actions, and people also, it sensitizes people again in another form of instead of just putting in complaints, you can say this. And one other perspective, bigger perspective to add about is, like when this is totally about the this side, from our side, what it is about. Some people, I can see some people, even though if you give this punishment, they're not able to accept it, whatever they did is wrong, right? So some people has to be tackled in different way, because they got obsessed in life and their reason for doing it is totally different. So if you give a major complaint also, did they come out of it, or did they learn a lesson from it? There are some set of people still, they don't learn a lesson from that. So that is
I'm
also
with
one major
you.
problem.
I think part of what we are talking about is really, if connect them, if boys don't know what harassment is, then everybody needs counseling. You know, the sense of telling people that this obsession or what society teaches you in standard popular culture as being the evidence of love is not love. It is harassment and the opposite. And so yes, I'm with you on the fact of it's not just punishment that will work. I think a general culture of respect needs to be inculcated.
Exactly. So that is one thing, ma'am. And also one other thing is, seriously, if something happens to the boys' side, uh, we literally don't know whether it comes under an offense or something, right? So if we don't know, see, actually the stats also might tell the boys would have given very less complaints, right? So literally, it's very hard for us to understand whether whatever it has happened to us is something wrong or good. It's even more intense that this side. So that's where the basic roots which starts. We don't know what are boundaries and what are the things, right? So that is very primary, and that should come up with. And coming to this punishment part, right? Coming to this punishment part, I think being more transparent or talking about this issues little bit open to this people will sensitize people a lot and reduce these kind of complaints. And also both everyone gets confidence about the system. Okay, there are some actions taken, there is some standard procedure to give our grievances and complaints and all, right? So this is
so Darwin, let me ask you the scale question as well. In terms of confidence in the process, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being least, 10 being high, what's the level of confidence right now in the complaint process?
very low, ma'am. Below 5. Below 5.
Below 5. Okay. So should I say 3 or 4?
Let's say 3. Let's say 3. Yes, it's 3, ma'am.
That's a very telling comment on the fact that there isn't confidence. So even if there are processes on campus, clearly the communication is lacking. And as and when people avail the process, there seem to be lacunae in it. Okay. Thanks for that, Darwin. Sankalpa, then Brisha, and then last words to Gayatri. We are wrapping up soon, people. There is a dinner awaiting many people. And we don't want to lose this audience because they've been with us for so long right now. Sankalpa.
So I've had a very different experience to what Brisha spoke about. In my immediate circle of extended friends, nobody has ever spoken about harassment. They claim to have not faced it. And in my first 2 years of campus life, it wasn't something that I thought was actually around. I never knew that it was a problem. I never knew that there were grievance redressal mechanisms by our CCASH. And I would only peripherally hear stories. Even though from my first year, I know that there were all of these seniors who would call us to, in our freshie year, call us to places late at night. And there would be some activities that seemed problematic that I knew were sort of happening. There was no conversation that it was harassment. There was no conversation about it going on. And I have an open question here to both Brisha and Darwin. Is this lack of conversation also because of the victim blaming that happens to the people who actually come up and speak about it? And my second question is, do these people know what consent is? Is that something that they think about? Is that something that comes up? And if it's not something that they either think about or is spoken about, then how can we reinforce the importance of consent in all interpersonal relationships that happen on campus?
Could I add something about the consent part and everything that she spoke about, right?
Of course, Brisha, and respond to her question as well, right, about the victim blaming thing.
Exactly. So firstly, I think victim blaming more because we see, like Darwin said, 2 out of 10 people even come out and probably talk to CCASH about it, right? Honestly speaking, even those 2, including the remaining 8, a lot of them blame themselves for having been in the situation in the first place. Okay. And that happens a lot. I mean, all these people I've spoken to, right, in the last couple of maybe the 1 year that I've been here, as the secretary, and people approach you and all of those kind of things. They literally say, I know it's my fault, but I feel what happened is wrong and I want to call out. And I was like, wait, how is that your fault? It's not your fault. Why, even if you put yourself in the situation or whatever, right? The second thing, why people feel it's their fault is because they draw a boundary at when consent has to be taken. Okay, very honestly speaking, consent, and a lot of times people say consent is yes or no. It's not that. It is you are aware when the person in front of you is not comfortable with what is happening, right? A lot of times people are not in that mental capacity, in that space to say a hard no, no, you can't do this to me. A lot of times it's even drowned out, right? So I personally feel that there is consent is a very big thing actually to be defined, and that level of maturity, that level of awareness needs to develop in all of us to be able to realize what consent actually is. Okay, and that is not just saying no. Honestly speaking, that is another thing. And coming back to I know we're talking about very big issues, right? Like, say for example, rape and all of that, but a lot of times I don't want to undermine the other issues, which are sexual harassment on a generic basis, right? And to be honest, that happens a lot on campus. Darwin said, right, a lot of people don't realize that it's wrong. They don't realize that it's a wrong line to draw or whatever. But once, I'm just saying that, once an issue has arisen, as small as it may be or big, right? Again, there's no small and big. But as the problem is, like once it has been placed into the hands of certain committee members, then very careful action should be taken on dealing with each issue. One, to separate out how do you say, to separate out fake complaints and real complaints. I get that there are actually cases of fake complaints and it is difficult to decipher between the two, but in whatever sense, right, it is your duty to really ensure that at all steps of the process the victim actually feels comfortable. It's like actually the organization or anybody, right, anybody needs to make them feel like they should come out and talk rather than them taking the initiative themselves, because you lose faith, right? A lot of times it's very difficult to want to come back and talk about it.
No, and I also want to address this bogey person of the fake complaint, right? Which always comes up saying, what about the fake complaints? I would say that given everything that all of you are saying, true complaints, whatever that means, far exceed this kind of fake complaining. And in a sense, I'm agreeing with you, Brisha, and saying that what about a culture of confidence, saying, please come forward and say it. Yeah. Your work is to come and talk about it, and the institution will communicate a zero tolerance policy, which communication seems to be missing at this point of time.
Exactly. And also just a very small thing to the fake complaints thing. I have actually seen one fake complaint affect a male friend of mine to a very great extent. And I am just saying, it is like, I understand it's very rare and that we need to really focus on the real complaints because we lose the purpose otherwise. I totally get that. But we need to have some mechanism, because I've actually seen some men really face a huge backlash, like a huge, humongous backlash because of this.
I'm not disagreeing at all, Risha. I'm just saying that the moment you front end that as being the caution against which all other complaints should be seen, I'm just cautioning against bad faith. I'm not saying that committees shouldn't do due diligence in trying to figure out what people actually mean. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to ask Gayatri to speak because everybody's hands been up. Davan, let me come right back to you. Yes, Gayatri hasn't spoken in a while.
Ma'am, the last point about fake complaints, we have mechanisms against it. There are punishments against fake complaints. So it's more of a cultural thing which blows up the fake complaints. I think your first question was to list out instances of sexual harassment we have known around us. So I know of close friends, and these are just instances that I stumbled upon, right? I didn't go seeking out for it, of rape happening within the institute. So that is very scary to think about, that somebody so close to you could have experienced it. Apart from that, there are instances where guys would have tried getting close to somebody physically. The girl actively showed that she wasn't interested, but they persisted or whatever. And after that, even when the girl tries to go and talk about it, people aren't willing to believe her. Her own male friends are often supportive of the perpetrator because, I don't know, brotherhood or whatever, kinship, bro culture. So that is one thing. And apart from that, I think there are many instances of sexual harassment, as simple as ogling or passing inappropriate comments on other people, which just put off the person who's at the receiving end of it and makes life just uncomfortable, to say the least. And talking about, I think there was a point about why do people not come up and talk about it. Victim shaming, etc., could be a part of it. But also, I once remember having a conversation with somebody who at the start admitted that she had never faced sexual harassment. And then going on to talk about what constitutes sexual harassment. At the end of the conversation, she was like, okay, maybe I have. So that is one thing. And also from personal experience, what I've realized it is any form of sexual harassment, right? Be it an inappropriate comment or maybe even more than that, unwelcome physical touch or whatever. My first reaction has always been, wait, first, it's not that. It is, the first reaction is denial. I don't know where that stems from. Maybe shame, maybe the idea that that is something that will never happen to you. You just think of it as a third person's problem, something that will never happen to you. And shame because somehow you are taught to be shameful of it. And also self-blaming, where you think you should not have done something, maybe. So, but this happens irrespective of it. This can happen in broad daylight, has happened in broad daylight when you are dressed up wearing traditional clothes, etc. So so that just brings me to how also talking about fake complaints, right? There needs to be an active culture against it, because there are so many barriers that a girl has to go through before she admits to herself, to her closest friends, and then to a third person that something has happened. And even like facing the perpetrator, there's probably just acknowledging the fact that the person has gone through such a difficult process would make us more sensitive to why we shouldn't be focusing so much on fake complaints. And also, another thing I realized is that whenever I talk about, maybe I received an inappropriate comment, or there was moral policing, somebody commenting on my dress or whatever, I generally try to, even when I do admit that it is something that has happened, I try to tone down my own experience. And I'm like, okay, it's no big deal. Like, this happens to everybody, so you deal with it and move on. But when I have confided in, let's say, a male friend, they react more aggressively than I do. Right, like I realize that maybe I have what do you call it, accepted it more than these people have. I would just like to believe in, you know, the better parts of people, and that, you know, if guys were just made aware of the girls around them, people they know, and the kind of experiences they have, then they would be so much more sensitive to it. And another thing is
yes, Gayatri, I'm going to have to ask for last comments because we're at 9:05
yes,
right now. We're going to lose this audience.
understood. Just one final point about how I, this is obviously maybe too idealistic, but I do not understand why we attach a sense of shame to sexual harassment. Like, the shame should be attached to the perpetrator. So I would like to believe that, you know, if ever I were to face any such adverse event, then I do not feel any sense of shame at all in going and talking about it in a public platform, shouting out the name of the person who is the perpetrator, and also to all the people talking about how it affects that person's life, etc., etc. That person always had the choice of not, uh, you know, putting themselves at that risk, the perpetrator, and yet they chose to do that. So shift the blame from the victim to the perpetrator.
Sure. So institutionally, we are talking about zero tolerance. We are talking about moving cultures from victims to oppressors of a certain kind. We are talking about a lot of work, which is also an extension to problems in society. IIT is but a microcosm of everything happening and other kinds of acculturation. Davin, I saw your hand. So last words to you.
Yes, ma'am. I missed one important thing, ma'am. So I told you, right, 8 out of 10 people doesn't have courage. So what happens is, this out of this few people tells their first set of close friends, right? So
Yeah.
those people try to threaten the other people, right? So that is something has to be stopped, right? So they have to come up with channel, right? Come through the channel. So I understand that people are supporting or standing with the victim, but they use it in different wrong ways, right? So blackmailing people, threatening people.
So you're saying that should somebody have experienced harassment, they tell their friends and their friends threaten the named oppressor?
Yeah, exactly.
I think this may be out of the purview of the conversation, Davin, because what we are saying is in the absence of confidence in mechanisms, people are, you know, drawing upon their closest resources to make them feel safe. So I'm not equipped to comment upon institutionally how we can stop that, right? Except to say that we need better processes.
Yes, ma'am. But I want to just say this incident also, whatever is happening. Like
Sure. No, I feel like while I have no sympathy for violence of any kind, I do think that people are drawing upon existing resources in any way to feel safe. It's like women going to the bathroom together. Yeah. Gayatri, absolute last words, because I do have to wrap up.
Yes, I'm sorry. Ma'am, another thing that can deter people from complaining is just the humongous process involved, a lack of transparency about what needs to be done, and also few rules. Like, I think you are expected to establish contact within 3 months of the event occurring. And it takes often longer than that to admit to yourself, your closest friends, and then to any third person that such a thing has happened. And also rules in the rule book which say things like, which stress more on how if the complaint was detected to be fake, then there'll be extreme punishment, etc. So it just seems to emphasize that more than supporting the victim.
Ma'am,
I think you're muted.
Sorry, I said I'm going to suggest, given that this has been an important set of discussions, and Hema is here, which is that we speak about this on a separate panel where we speak specifically about CCASH and other processes of redressal, so we can address it institutionally as well. Hema, would that be a possibility? I would.
Matangi, I'm being replaced by somebody else. So perhaps the other person will take over soon.
Okay, Ma. Could I then invite you to share your experiences while you were chairing CCASH at that panel too at some point?
Yeah,
and Indu, that be a possibility?
The only thing that I would like to say is what Brisha and Gayatri and all said, absolutely right. We need more transparency. We're trying to put things on the web. It's not happening. And the point is not, and I liked what Gayatri said, that, the victim is not to blame. And feeling hurtful and all is ridiculous. I think this is something that the Institute needs to work a lot about.
No, we are sitting at the edge of a crisis.
Have the freedom to talk about it. And it's just like you cut your finger, you perhaps had some problem and it will also heal. But redressal is absolutely required. And we need to fix that. And we need to get redressal quickly enough. I agree that things are not as quick as they would like. But unfortunately, we do have processes which we have to follow. We try to do things within 90 days, which is what is required of the complaint. That we have done quite routinely in all these cases that I have had. Some cases are very difficult. And we try to figure this out.
Yeah. Thank you, Hema. Thank you so much. And I think perhaps what to take note of is really how can we collectively build both a culture of confidence as well as a culture of feeling safe in being able to have voices heard, especially in light of everything that our panelists have said so far as to the rampant state of sexism and sexual harassment that seems to be far more, what's the word I'm looking for? Entrenched than one would have imagined. But I do think that today's panel has unearthed in a lot of ways how the discussion is ongoing, how many people are talking about these things, not the least of which are the four of you. So I want to end the session on a note of hope and say, I hope this is the first of many such discussions, followed by action points, which we'll then come back and discuss as well, so that we build upon the process. Thank you all for having been here this evening. Thank you to the audience members for having spent the last 2 hours with us. Hema, Indu, any last words? Indu, otherwise, please take over. It's been an absolute pleasure to moderate this discussion. Thank you, Gayatri, Sankalpa, Darwin, Brisha.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Matangi, Gayatri, Sankalpa, Brisha, Darwin. It was really an eye-opener for many of us. It gave a lot of insights on the world of students. Although we've been hearing stuff, it's good to hear, and particularly Darwin's inputs were really valuable. Again, I would like to reinforce here that problems, we are aware of the problems do exist. We have unique problems in campus, but I would also like to hear from you solutions. So we don't have time now, but feel free to email me or Gayatri, whatever you think of. Like one thing which we have been talking about is having a forum, and it can be an anonymous forum where we are in the process of developing one. I need your help here, where people can just report on a day-to-day basis, hey, this happened to me, without names or anything. Like this whole Brisha's statistics is mind-boggling. A number of people who are impacted. We thought that undergrads, the number would be less because they are so outspoken. That's a common thing what we faculty think. The research scholars and masters girls probably have a lot more to face than the undergrads. But well, we are hearing something very different here. So yes, we're looking for solutions, and the solutions can only come from you people, and we are open to implement anything within a small time frame so we can see changes happen quickly, and that will motivate more people to speak up, okay, whatever they face. And we need these numbers. Only then I can go to the admin with a set of solutions and ask their support. Okay, unless I have data, so many reported incidents of such and such harassment case or such and such requirement from students. Okay, so feel free to just send your inputs. We can document everything and then make sure that change happens. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you very much. It's been a long discussion. Thank you for staying with us. And let's keep the discussions going. I think Tarun was here and was suggesting that we should have similar discussions among for other women community, including faculty. So let's have more panel discussions like this. All right. So thank you and have a great weekend.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you all and bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank ma'am.
Hello? Hello?